Welcome to the Herpcore History podcast, presented to you by Little Shop of Horrors. Feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms for any of your feeder needs. All right, let's go ahead and get into this episode. All right, tonight I am joined by Mr. Tracy Thompson. He was gracious enough to talk with me tonight. How's it going?
Oh, it's going good. Going good.
Excellent. So where'd you grow up around?
Well, I was born in St. Louis. My father's in the Air Force, and from there went to Alaska. I was an infant when I went to Alaska.
Alaska's not really a good spot for herps, huh?
Well, not really. I didn't even know what they were. So, I grew up in Alaska till the time I was 5, and he got stationed in San Angelo, Texas, and my parents purchased a little house in San Angelo. And at the age of 5, I distinctly remember going into the backyard, and there was something crawling across the grass. So I grabbed it and took it inside to ask my mom what it was. And it was Phronosoma, horn lizard. And that was my first encounter. And I guess I never learned the phobias and the, frogs give you warts, or, snakes are bad and that sort of thing. So I just, it took off from there.
Yes, sir, yeah. So crazy. I literally had someone today bring that up with me. The frogs give you warts thing. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, no, man, that's not true.
That's an old,
I thought that was
you don't hear it much anymore, but years ago you heard it a lot.
Yes, sir. Well, I heard it today. And that person was asking me a serious question. Oh, that's so interesting. And so that was kind of, you're 5, 6, kind of at that point, you're in Texas and you see that horned toad. And what was the following animals that you saw after that, or did that set off the fire?
That really set the fire. Then I learned you could, shortly after that, my parents encouraged my interest, and we'd go into the back alleys, and in the early morning, late afternoon, you'd walk down there, and God, we would catch 20 or 30 in a day, and we'd bring them back to the house and look at them. Somewhere there's some old Polaroids we took of them, but I don't know where they're at. And we would take them back, and I precisely knew where each one of them, where I caught each one. And we would, so it really started there. The rest of the herps that I ran across back then were pretty much a blur. There were some, we'd go down to the Red Arroyo, is a creek, and I'd chase some water snakes and stuff like that. But pretty much it was the horn lizards.
Yes, sir. And at that point, did you have any like neighborhood friends you were doing it with, or were you picking up books at that point, or did you have a mentor that kind of stepped in like a teacher or something?
Not at that time. Some of the kids would go with me. They didn't hold the interest that I held. God, I distinctly remember the book in my mind. It had on the front. It had a collared lizard. It might have been a small paperback book. Roger Conant, is that correct? I believe that name comes to mind.
I'm not sure. Hopefully, someone will. I think, man, I think I've heard someone else bring this book up, and I'm not familiar.
Yeah,
I'd have to.
I'm 60, just turned 67. Memory's not quite as good as it used to be.
Yes, sir. No, that's completely understandable. I need to get up on my kind of history of different field guides going throughout because they come out, and I unfortunately don't usually have very much to comment on that other than just making sure I get the question asked, the ones. But yeah, no, I mean, especially at a young age, going through field guides and getting to look at those pictures and kind of understanding there's other stuff out there, and
Hmm.
if it had range maps in it and getting to look at that stuff, that really gets the blood flowing thinking about where you can go. And when what besides just kind of going around the neighborhood, when did you start getting a little bit more serious about reptiles?
Well, my father, he so he had to travel to Florida. He was still in the military, and while he was out there, and as you know, in Florida, there's a lot of, even back in those days, a lot of exotic animal and reptile businesses.
Yes, sir.
And he bought a hook nose snake and shipped it to me through the mail, which I
Huh.
believe was legal back then, which of course it
Yes,
is
sir.
now. And that was the first snake that I kept. Um, Sadly, I could never get it to feed. We tried all kinds of things, and husbandry wise, I just wasn't really there with it. Now, I had an uncle that he was very fascinated with reptiles and amphibians, but he was also very scared of them. Um, and another very serious book that I got was Living Reptiles of the World, he gave to me. And I still have that book.
Very cool.
And, but things really didn't start picking up herp wise until we moved to Dallas. I just, I just was a horn lizard freak at that point. My
Yes, sir.
Now down in San Angelo, my brothers, they participated in a rattlesnake roundup, and we went to the festival, and we were not, my brothers, my parents, and myself, we were not very happy with you know, my brothers knew that the snakes were going to be killed and skinned, and but the cruelty that was involved was something else. So that was the last time they participated in anything like that. And of course, they didn't know any better. Gas and dens and stuff like that. That it destroys the entire microhabitat of the den site. Not just it damages the snakes, but everything that lives in there is dead after they
Yes, sir. Yeah.
blast those dens.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's a terrible practice, and but especially early on, then the think of how limited the resources were that so people especially didn't know, and so yeah, to have those type of things around you and kind of get to see that, uh, I'm sure yeah, it puts a sour taste in your mouth, and then so getting away from there and kind of moving up to Dallas, that was kind of a turning point in your keeping.
Yeah. So I attended a school. I was back in those days. They thought I had learning disabilities, and my problem was I was real ADHD. So I had a lot of problems focusing. If I was interested in it, I was all about it. If I wasn't interested in it, so I went to a private school in downtown Dallas that worked with, I guess, if you didn't pass grades, you were special education. That's
Uh,
that's all they knew, They don't
yes, sir.
things aren't as advanced as they are now. But one time I caught the wrong bus and it took me down into Oak Cliff. And I saw this big sign said the Dallas Zoo. So I pulled the string and got off and went into the zoo. And I was there until it closed. And, of course, security is walking and saying, hey, you got to leave. And who are you here with? Where are your parents? And I explained everything to them, and I was just so taken away. But the thing that I discovered at the zoo was the herpetarium,
Mm,
and I spent hours in there. Just I must have looked over the same exhibit that day probably 20 times.
yes, sir.
And so, anyways, they called my parents, and my parents were freaked out, and they came down and picked me up. And yeah, I got in trouble. But anyways, so they agreed that I could go to the zoo. I could take the bus. My mom looked at the bus schedule, and on the weekends, like probably twice a month, I'd go to the zoo. By this time, I was about 9 or 10, and I'd seen some of the keepers walking between. They'd walk into the public area, going into another section and stuff. And I never could. I always wanted to go and talk to them, but I really didn't know what to say. And then I think
Yes, sir.
by this time, I was about 12 or 13. I just decided I'm going to go knock on the door. So I knocked on the door, and this gentleman came to the door. His name's David Barker. So I'm 13 and he was 19, I guess it is. And I told him what my name was, and by this time I had purchased I'd purchased a carpet python from a man named Barney Tumberland, and I think he was either out of Arizona or Florida. And then I also had uh, an insular form of boa constrictor. Um, they called it a clouded boa. Later to find out it was a boa from uh, a chain of islands called Carl Keys boa.
Okay.
But it was uh, boa constrictor nebulosa, from what I remember. Anyways, I so Dave says, "Well, do you keep?" Do you have any reptile? And I told him one. He's like, "Wow, you got a carpet python?" He says, "Hang on." I guess he went and asked. I guess it was probably Jim Murphy. They said, "Sure, come on back." And so I kind of became a regular going behind the scenes, and I got to know David. David lived right behind the zoo, and I mean, that's when things really kicked in. Excuse me.
All good. And what are the chances, right, of getting to meet, David Barker so early on, and kind of how influential that guy would be, and what are the chances to run into that person, when you knock down that door, and how it sounds like it opened up the hobby moving forward.
Oh yeah, because I mean, David. So I mean, he's from Chicago, and I believe before. I don't know. I think I don't know how long he'd been working there, probably not very long. But I think either then or just before that, he'd been coming down to Texas, going into West Texas, and trying to figure out the alterna mystery, like so many of the early guys from uh, a few specimens. I mean, nobody knew where to go or how to look for them. And
Yes, sir.
but anyways, he not quite sure how, but obviously he applied and got hired, and then and he just was the one that opened the door. It could have been Ardell. I remember Ardell Mitchell was there. There was Murphy. And then in those early days, I can't remember the other guys' names. But anyways, that's pretty much where it started.
Yes, sir. And so, what were some of the what are some of your early memories of kind of getting to go back there and seeing that? Was there anything that really? I'm just imagine there's so many things, but what sticks out in your memory of those experiences?
Well, I mean, it was the first time I saw off exhibit caged reptiles and amphibians, and it was very
Mm,
practical. It wasn't there wasn't a lot of cage furnitures. Just and I remember one of the first things I asked. I said, "Y'all y'all keep them on newspaper?"
mm,
And I mean, yeah, the questions were. I mean, I just well, you'd never seen anything like that. And I
yes, sir.
remember all the there was a lot of wooden cages that were painted that had sliding glass fronts. Um, a lot of aquariums with screen lids and like bricks on top, kind of thing. I mean, it was compared to what you see now. It was is big time old school, but at the time it was cutting edge. And then I remember seeing years later some newer cages that they had were made by a company called Neo Deshay, and they were fiberglass and they were kind of angled with sliding glass, and that
Yes,
was
sir.
state of the art for that time.
Yeah, yeah. What an iconic looking cage, right? You don't really see them around too much, but very very cool looking cage when I think about the nostalgia aspect of it.
Oh yeah.
And didn't the gentleman that do that, didn't he start off with like making fiberglass truck beds and then thought, huh, I could make snake cages out of these?
I'm not sure. Interestingly, later in this interview, which we'll talk about, I worked for Dave and Tracy Barker in at VPI in Bernie, Texas, and they 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 had custom caging built for all the pythons that they were housing through Neo Deshay.
Gotcha. Yes, sir. Well, excellent. And so at that point, you're going in there, you're noticing, hey, this is a whole nother way of keeping. You're understanding that. I mean, that's so valuable as a young keeper coming in to be able to see what is state of the art at the time and have those lines of communication that really set you off with a good base foundation for your keeping moving forward.
Yeah, and now that I'm thinking about it, I remember seeing they had they had human uh, incubators, and I guess they got like older ones from the hospital system, and they had
Mm,
gallon jars in those, and eggs in incubation. And in those days, I mean, everybody you used vermiculite and you mixed it by weight. I believe it was it might have been volume to weight, but it was a 1-to-1 mixture of vermiculite in water in those days. And then later they
Yes, sir.
found out that, well, that's just too wet. And so they started going, for years, it was 2 to 1 on your vermiculite to water ratio, which is much drier. And then as years goes on, they got drier and drier. And then they got to the point where, and Dave was actually the one that kind of pioneered it. He hatched some, and I believe it was Bolin's python eggs, um, where there was no substrate. It was just water, and then they were suspended over the water, and I believe it was in like a sack of cheesecloth. That way, you had humidity all around the eggs, but without the eggs touching water.
Yes, sir. Oh, that's so interesting, especially because you kind of see some of that a little bit more prolifically now in the hobby. The kind of hanging eggs over water. So that's so interesting to have that thought and then do it. And be
Yeah,
one of the first people to think about it.
he may have been the first, or he may have picked the idea up from somebody. So, but
Yes, sir.
it made sense. And, today, I mean, well, I don't use cheesecloth, but I use light deflector material. That way,
Yes, sir.
there's the eggs are just above just above the substrate, and I use uh, perlite. That way, if I have to move the container, it doesn't slosh and get a little water on the eggs.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, I've always been, it's so funny. I'm so scared to do anything other than what I do with my eggs
Hmm.
that like this works. I'm not changing it. And that's, maybe not the best way. It's not the best way of keeping by any means. We
Well,
should always be trying new
there.
things.
I, I've evolved to the point where, and I still use the pieces of light diffuser to keep my eggs from touching the wet substrate. But
Yes, sir.
if and I give a lot of advice today, but if somebody has a method that where they're using like straight vermiculite, um, and it's wet to a varying degree, and they're having good ratios, I say, hey, if it works, don't change it. Um,
Yes, sir.
there's some people are the very first time I hatched out reptile eggs, uh, I used sand, and we took the sand, we boiled it, and just to clean it up as best we could, and of course we let it cool down and got it wet enough where it would clump. And there's some people that still do that today. Uh, they like it, it works, and I'll be the first to tell them, hey, if it's working, keep going.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, interesting. And so, kind of getting linked up with that group of guys and getting to hang out. What were some of your earliest field herping experiences, and where were those trips to?
Pretty much. I lived in Dallas, about a mile north of White Rock Lake. So the
Yes, sir.
first things that I mean, we would just go down to the lake, and there was a north part of the lake. It was a lot. It was real kind of swampy, and we'd go back through there, turn over logs, and because it would flood, there would be debris and stuff at right at the flood areas. We'd go through that, and there was a lot of southern copperheads, a lot of skinks, a lot of 5 line skinks, little brown skinks. God, I can't remember with the blue tail. Um, lots of rat snakes. Texas rat snakes, Linheimer eye. And then when we could talk my mom into it, we would drive around on the highways to build, like there'd be a big billboard sign. Well, when you'd see one of those, you knew that below it was old billboards laying beneath it. We'd go and flip those things.
Huh.
And
Interesting.
uh, we found speckled kings. We found prairie kings. That was my first bull snake encounter.
Oh yeah.
And they don't. And then at some point, because of city ordinances and stuff, they weren't allowed to do that anymore. And they got cleaned up, so you didn't have anything to flip. And
Yeah.
because we had a route that we would go to, and
How cool is that? Yeah, I hadn't heard of doing that before, so that's so interesting to hear that.
yeah, it worked quite well. It's kind of like, and we had our areas, and um, I really didn't know any herpers yet. It seems like I was telling Dave about it, and Dave was going. He was very inquisitive. Well, where are these areas? Tell me. And he's like, "Don't tell anybody else." I said, "Who else would I tell?" But then I sort of learned later as I got involved in the Herpetological Society in Dallas. Yeah, you keep your spot secret, or somebody will beat you to it.
Yes, sir. It's so funny how secretive we are now, but early on, especially when it was like, well, this is what I do, and really no one else is into this. To then go, and be like, hey, don't talk about this because you're
Yeah.
gonna get your spots burnt.
Now, I do remember, and it was just before the Dallas Herpetological Society came to be. There was a group of people. There was a curator of uh, of the Natural Science and History Museum, Wayne Cipher, and Dave Barker, uh, Terry Hibbets. There's some other guys. I can't remember if David Bloody was at that. Maybe Bloody wasn't down here yet. Maybe Bill Lamro. Anyways, I went to the very first meeting, and it was in the basement at the uh, uh, Natural Science and History Museum in Dallas, Fair Park. And interestingly, just before that first meeting, I had a friend, and he was a herper that I had met, and his parents had a lake house in Montague County, this little lake called Moss Lake. And so I went with him. I think it was like spring break. We went up there, and we had no idea what was around there. It was a newly acquired property that his dad bought. So we went like kids do, jumped some fences back to the cattle pastures, and there was drainages and scattered trees and stuff. There was flat rocks everywhere, and we started flipping rocks. And we flipped one rock, and there's a milk snake, and we thought, "This is it, man. We're big time now." Um, and we, um, uh, we caught a few speckled kings. Interestingly, one of which had it regurgitated a milk snake in the bag.
Oh wow.
And then we found the second one, second milk snake. And so right after that, um, David told me about the the first meeting. So me and him went. His name was Ed, a guy named Ed Laurent, and we went to the first meeting. And so everybody's talking about the structures of the meetings and all this, and we're sitting there. And I had a little backpack, but I had a plastic half-gallon jar with these two milk snakes. And anyways, so somebody just goes, "What do you got there?" Kind of off to the side. I mean, I pulled them out. The whole meeting shifted on onto those, and then the the debate was well, I think they're Amora. No, they're Gentilis, and it was pretty funny. But to this day, I believe they're Amora with a Gentilis in it, influence. But the latest taxonomy will tell you that they're all Gentilis, which I don't agree with. But anyways, so that was the first meeting at the Dallas Herpetological Society.
What was that? What was that like walking in there? And had you been to any like reptile shows? Was that something that was around at that point?
There was no,
Or
excuse me, there were no reptile shows at that time. Uh,
gotcha.
I mean, we didn't know what to expect going down there. I remember Ed. I mean, we were sitting there. Ed saying to me, "This is boring," and it was just in the basement, and there was about a dozen chairs in a circle, and just everybody sitting around, talking about. They were developing the structure of the society and everything.
Yes, sir.
Anyways, to say the least, that meeting had to be redone, and they decided nobody should bring any animals because they're a distraction. Which years later kind of went out the window, and the rule was if you have animals here, uh, keep them under wraps till the end of the meeting.
Yes, sir.
And that probably was some of the first type of show, I guess you could say, because people would pull their stuff out, and then it was swapping and back and forth, and buying and selling, and
Yeah, what was it like kind of walking in there the first time and seeing so many like-minded people?
yeah,
Do you kind
it
of
was it was really yeah, it's I mean, it's been a long time, but I'll never it's one of those days you'll never forget.
yes, sir. Yeah, no, what a cool thing to get to experience and just as it expands, right? That's the thing about the reptile hobby as you know. It's so multifaceted, right? Where you end up with friends through it, the joy of it just there's so many levels of enjoyment to the hobby and to kind of be right at that pioneering steps of organizing those people and getting together. How cool is that to be in those moments?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a very very neat experience, and we met once a month, and and then they for a while it was in the basement, and then it was up top in one of the breakout rooms, um, which is really neat. I mean, they had all kinds of exhibitry around the edges of the rooms, and there'd be slideshows, speakers, and there wasn't a whole, everything was about pretty much about natural history and some field herping stuff. Uh, I think it was at that meeting, and it was um, Terry Hibbett's, and he made it. Terry Hibbett's, even in that day, he was a big field collector. Um, but he drove home the point. He says, when you flip a board, when you flip a rock, a log, put it back.
Yes, sir.
And he was the first person I'd heard that from. But he's right. Because, I mean, it's little micro habitats. And if you just flip everything and leave it, you're destroying that micro habitat, not just for the herps, but for anything that depends on on that.
Yes, sir.
And so I guess by that time I guess I was 16 or so. There was a period there from when I was about 14 to about 15. I I was a little juvenile delinquent and got in trouble, and my parents sent me away to school in Austin. I spent a long time down there, and it was I screwed up, but I came out a better for it. So
Yes, sir.
um, so I'm trying to think. Then as I got to work a drive. Um, then we got to experience our first road cruising, and probably the best place in Dallas Fort Worth to road cruise was a road in Southwest Fort Worth. They called it the Benbrook Alito Road. I was like to the point where I could drive, and I had a my first car was a '69 Camaro. God, that was so sweet. So we go. So we found out about this road. Actually, I think, and there was another gentleman I didn't mention from my first encounter at the Dallas Herpetological Society, the first meeting. Jack Joy. He was also there at the first meeting. He was I believe, the director of the Dallas Zoo, and of course, I'd see him at every meeting, and he told us about the road, and it was a real hot spot for Massasaugas. You could go out there on a bad night, and I believe the cruising area was about a 4 or 5 mile stretch, and on a bad night, 2 or 3 Massasaugas, and
Oh wow.
I experienced a night one time where we didn't collect them, but there was like 20 Massasaugas. You'd find lots of DOR Massasaugas on that road. So pretty much that was my first experience with road riding, and pretty much everything else was kind of hit and miss. You would just sort of get out and drive, and and I was I had real long hair back then, and the local cops said, "What are you doing out here, boy?" And of course, you start showing them what you've collected and your books and stuff, and they'd be like, "Okay, you can go ahead."
Yes, sir. Yeah. Honesty is the best policy with that. Yeah. Like
Well,
I'm
they just
I'm a dork,
yeah.
right? Check this out.
But and then speaking about Jack Joy, I had some more. I mean, we went several times up to the Moss Lake area, and we collected up there a lot. And there was another time I had some milk snakes, and Dave wanted some, and I was going to drop them off at the zoo. And we were walking across the bridge, and my girlfriend at the time, because she had a purse, I said, "Here, put these in your purse." And we're on the bridge, and she pulls the little snake bag out and goes, "Here." And Jack was walking. He goes, I mean, Jack's a lifelong herper, and he's like, "Whoa, whoa, what do we have here? You're not supposed to bring these in the zoo." Anyways, Jack ended up buying one of them, and it's one of the ones that Dave wanted. Dave was like, "That son of a bitch," and so
Well, interesting. So right. So you're getting out there, and at that point, so when did you start working in the zoo field?
it was 19 it was the end, I think it was the end of 1988. And I had been by that time I'd become I'd become a king snake, a breeder of king snakes, because that was the big thing. It was all Mex and Theri and well, they're Leonis now, but I still call them Theri. Uh, Alterna, just various types of, uh, and then there were some mutations. I remember that some of the first mutations I heard about was albino corn snakes,
Mhm.
and interestingly, I never worked with albino corn snakes, um, but I had albino prairie kings and just all kinds of stuff, Florida pines, and and I'd acquired some milk snakes from the Dallas Zoo that were, God, they weren't. Well, they thought they were Lamprepeltis triangular morcifera, and actually they were misidentified. And later we found out that they were Ruffini,
Mhm.
but Dave was thinking they were some type of a Mexicana at some point because of their scale count. But when DNA testing became a lot more affordable, they were able to figure a lot of this stuff out.
Yes, sir.
And and during that time, there was a gentleman that had moved into Arlington for a job. He was from Southern California, and he had a friend that was a I can't remember, real into insects. And this guy in Quethro, little town of Hall Pond, there's three roads that go in there. One is kind of runs southwest, and it goes up a mountainside. Um, and he was up on that. There was a bend in the road where there was a wide area, and he set up ultra 12-volt ultraviolet lights and netting for collecting insects. And this
Oh,
gentleman
very
was
cool.
somewhat of a reptile guy. And as he's sitting out there watching his nets, in the blue light, he see a snake, and he went with his flashlight, looked at him, and was like, "Well, that's some kind of tricolored king snake, milk snake." So he got it, and he caught two, and they happened to be a pair. And this guy that had them, he had them in California, and then he brought them out. He was living in Arlington. A guy named Bob can't remember his last name. But anyways, he knew Dave, and he was of the Southern Cal group of Mexicana nuts and Alterna nuts, and anyways, he had these things, and Dave thought that they were, because of their location, that they were a form of Mex-Mex, Mexicana, that were tricolored, because there was nothing else in that area, and they were definitely some kind of a king snake.
Yes, sir.
And anyways, I ended up acquiring them from this guy. The guy he was moving back to Southern Cal, and he needed money, and you know, shoot, I was I was always hitting him up for him, and I called Dave. I said, "Hey, I've got those Hall Pond king snakes." He was like, "Wow, you got those?" So Dave came up with the idea to, let's see if it works like Theri, where you have milk snake phase Theri, and you have a Leonis phase Theri,
Mm-hmm.
and you breed them together, and you get some of each.
Yes, sir.
So we bred them, and that didn't happen. What came out were these mixed up looking things,
Huh.
and much later through DNA testing, I think it was Bob Hansen, he figured out that they were Ruffini, and they're the farthest eastern locale of Ruffini. And it's kind of interesting because there's a big desert area separating the type locality of Ruffini. Although I think in the paper he put out, they do show a small marker for Mexicana, which would make sense. They're close, and so it's probably at some point there was some natural integration.
Yes, sir. Well, how interesting is that? And then to kind of see those animals and spark that interest, and very cool, very cool.
Yeah, yeah. It. I mean, there was a lot of debate about it for years and years, but then once the DNA testing came out, um, pretty much, and then there was a group went out there and they never could find one in that area, and so there's a group of people that even doubt that those existed, because the gentleman that collected it has passed away, so there's really no way
Yes,
to
sir.
prove one way or the other. But uh,
Well, it's the luck of the birder, right? It's the person that's not interested in it full, enough, obviously enough to pick them up, right? But just
Mhm.
that's not what I'm there for. And what are the chances, right? We'll spend a million nights walking a cut and not see anything, and then the guy stood on the side of the road with the, looking at the stars. Oh, look what crawled in front of me. What's this? You know?
Oh yeah. Well, it. This friend of mine's got a ranch that I'm a bow hunter, and I go out and I bow hunt, and I go out there a lot. He is scared to death of snakes, and I've gotten him to where I've educated him enough that he knows coach whips. He knows, like, Glenn, these are good. Don't shoot these.
Yeah.
But he sees snakes all the time. I rarely see snakes out there. We were
That's
just
how it
talking about
works,
that the
right?
other day.
It's so funny that that's how it ends up playing out. But I guess in this weird simulation we're in, the game plays a trick on us. I
Yeah.
don't know. Got to pretend we're not into it. Well, and that's so interesting. And again, just always that constant education with people, and even might not be the thing they're interested in, but just taking the time to educate people, it does pay off over time, and is very much so worth doing.
Sure. So, anyways, so yeah, I was a colubrid snake breeder, king snake breeder, and we kind of were looked at in the hobby like ball python breeders are today.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that
And
makes
I'm not
sense.
saying anything wrong about ball python breeders. I know some guys that that's all they've ever done is ball pythons. That's it. I mean, that's the only taxa they work with.
Yes, sir.
Husbandry wise, they're sharp. I mean, because these are people that invest their money. Uh, if if they have 100 eggs one year, they have. I mean, they need to hatch all of them.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think that's the thing that people need to understand, and not to tangent off this, off of our discussion too far, but that the infrastructure that the ball python hobby provided to the rest of herpetoculture is a complete shift in what you and even me when I was younger got, what we could get our hands on and what was out there. If you look at it now with the serious science behind it and just so many resources to use out there, caging wise and equipment wise, if it wasn't for that market, I don't think we would be as far advanced as we are now.
well, not only that, there's a lot of people that started out with ball pythons, and they're now working with other species and different taxa, and it's actually helped uh, herpetoculture, and it's grown the hobby. I mean,
Yes, sir.
because and I know people who started out with ball pythons, and at some point they got they kind of got bored with it, and they got into other things, and so yeah, it has been a good thing. But anyways, so that's kind of when I was just before I got into the zoo field, how I was looked at, and I got a call from Dave Blody, and he started at Dallas, and he applied at Fort Worth for the curator position and got it. And at the time, he went from just a keeper to a curator. Um, Everybody's going, "Wow!" And Dave did a great job out there. His exhibitry was just really really off the chart, uh, and he did a lot of great things out there. Um, the year I was out there, uh, we won the Bean Award, and that's all under Dave Blody's direction. And he had a
Yes, sir.
a strong assistant curator, Rick Hudson, and they had a great staff out there. But anyways, so Dave gives me a call, and he said, "Do you know anybody that would be interested in this newly created position out here at the Herpetarium? It'd be full time. You don't get any benefits, um, and it's something we've been trying to get a new another keeper position. It wasn't working, but we got the city to agree to this." I said, "Yeah, I would." And he's like, "Oh, really?" So, anyways, I went out there and I just pretty much talked with him and Rick. There really wasn't an interview process for that, and I was just appointed. And um, and I was driving. God, I remember my first day. There was an ice storm, and I drove from Dallas to Fort Worth. It took me 2.5 hours to get there because of all the ice.
Yes, sir.
And me and Dave were the only ones that showed up. This is Dave Blody. We got 2 days, Dave Blody and Dave Barker.
Gotcha. Yes, sir.
And and
Well, I mean,
that was a ride, that job. Go ahead.
what was well, no? So, what were some of the standout things he ran into that made it what it was for you?
Well, there was a lot of, I mean, I didn't know when I got there. I, I, I remember when they gave me my section and they gave me lots of lizards. And I was thinking, crap, I, I really had never at the time dealt with any lizard species. But
Mm,
I was given a lot of geckos, um, and a lot of stuff that I was given to my section was a lot of Madagascar stuff, which uh, that was Madagascar was Rick Hudson's. Uh, I mean, he had a lot of interest in Madagascar, and there's a lot of problems out there, and with uh, I mean them cutting the forest down for more coffee plantations, and it's just not a good situation. But
yes, sir.
so they gave the Fort Worth was at the time had the probably more Phelsuma standing eye than any other zoo, and I'm not sure if they were. I think they were just threatened at the time. I don't know if they were critical, but no, they had been bred before in captivity, but nobody had bred them with any kind of is like hit and miss. And so so I read a natural history paper and discovered we were keeping them too cool. Those things bask at over 100 degrees.
Yeah.
And so I set them up like that. And back in those days, we used, for UVA and UVB, we used a combination of a BL350 black light and this light called a Vitalite. It's a it's a it's a lighting that people in the way, like say up in Alaska, they use a lot because I mean, some point you just don't get a lot of vitamin D3 from the sun because I mean you just don't get a lot of sun. And it was a light that was developed for that, but for reptiles, no. But anyway, so we were using the BL350 black light and the Vitalite, and then they started I mean, these guys. So I was feeding them like crickets 3 times a week, dusted with calcium carbonate, and these things were losing weight. So I started feeding them like 4 times a week, and then shoot, you fed them every day, and and then we would uh, we would also take apricot baby food and mix calcium carbonate and oh geez, there was a reptile vitamin out. Everybody used it, and again, nobody really knew. Nobody really knew. Everything was by trial and error,
Yes, sir.
and and they really started putting weight on, and at the back of their jaws they got these endolymphatic sacs, um, and I believe they store calcium. Well, the females, I mean, these things were hanging down, almost looked like hound dog ears on these geckos. And then we started
Uh-huh.
getting eggs, and we started getting eggs, and um, we were hatching babies like crazy, and and they were assigned ISIS numbers, and they were being sent to all these zoos. And this was in the old building, the center section. And one of the keepers came up. He came up with a joke. He says the center section room, or the center section, is standing eye room only. Yeah. And then it got to the point where Rick said, we can't breed these anymore, because if we do, no one's going to take them. And I still had eggs cranking out, and hatching and stuff. And even when we tried to scale them, they got really prolific. And so they started releasing them around the building for cockroach control. And so that was a neat deal. And and we worked with Europlatus fimbriatus, the giant Madagascar leaf-tailed geckos. And
Very cool.
I believe it was San Diego bred them first. And the interesting thing, I mean, those things are nocturnal, but they require UVA and UVB, even though they're nocturnal. So what the deal is, I mean, when you observe them at night, I mean, they're all over the cage, and but during the day, they find a spot, and if it's on bark, I mean, you can barely see them, because they just look like they're part of the tree. So, in discussions about them, I mean, it just seemed reasonable that they're out doing their thing, and then as the sun comes up, they just find a spot, and they get a lot of direct and indirect UVA and UVB, even though they're dormant, just hanging out on the side of a tree bark, waiting for the night to come.
Interesting.
And so we put UVA and UVB on those things, and it was like overnight, I mean, the social behavior just changed.
Huh.
And those were Hudson's babies, and he just started cranking out eggs like crazy.
Very interesting. Did you notice a difference in their sleeping habits and where they were staying after that as well?
No, they pretty much. I think when they shut down for the day, it's just pretty much wherever they are.
Interesting.
And so if they were to had, say, got like found some kind of shelter, then they wouldn't be receiving direct sunlight. But
Interesting.
It's my understanding that, and I've never been to Madagascar, but in the wild, as you're walking through the forest and stuff, if you got a sharp eye and you know what you're looking for, you'll see them like in the middle of the day. Oh, there's one right there on the trunk of that tree, and they're how they hang upside down.
Gotcha.
And the interesting thing about how they hang upside down on the bark, when it rains, is water's running over their body and over their head. That's when they drink.
Wow. Think about that being so specialized, and just so successful at what you're doing, that you get to a point where you go, yeah, we stop where we stop. Because I think, we've all been out there, right, where you're walking a cut out in West Texas, and maybe you go back the second night, third night, and you see a lizard sleeping in the exact same spot. And so the idea of a lizard doing that to me, it is not a crazy thought. But then when you think about, this species where potentially it's just like, nope, yep, this is where we stop.
Mhm.
How that affects that animal. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's and I mean, and like taking Fimbriatus as an example, that's how they work. Where um, I think something like a Phelsuma, because they're diurnal big time. Um, come come night, they'll be out. Now they're probably more crepuscular, and then like in the middle of the day, they'll find some little crevice to squeeze into, and but yeah, each animal has their own habits, and in doing so, um, in relation with the sun, it's just like a lot of snakes I know that are black. A lot of times are observed to be where they bask more than
Yes, sir.
than snakes that aren't black, and that's not a rule of thumb, but it's just an observation. But it makes sense because black uh, absorbs heat. For
Yes, sir. Yeah.
instance, I mean, like look at Alterna; they're silver. You know,
Yeah, and alternate are very interesting, right? That's yeah, definitely one of my favorite species. So you were keeping king snakes early on. What was I assume? I mean, you were in Texas, so I assume you were hitting up West Texas, going field herping.
yeah.
What were some of your early trips to West Texas like?
I've never collected an Alterna in my life. Uh, South Texas, I tore it up. I've collected a lot of ambulata down there. And it's interesting talking about ambulata. I've got a little Facebook page called Mexican Milk Snake page. I think there's maybe 800 people on it. Uh, that I would have to say is my favorite Lamprepeltis. That just that one. They're just I don't know. There's something about them. One time was I think I was about 18. Me and a friend went to South Texas during a hurricane. Of course, it was in the fall, and we hit this little road. It was a rocket run. We had one night. We hit this little road south of Hebernsville that ran east and west. We only ran it. I think that road's about 15 miles. We only ran it four times, and God, there were checkered garters everywhere. We collected a bag of those. There was God, I can't remember Doctor. I want to say Neil Ford. I may be wrong. He 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 is out of a university in East Texas. He was looking for checkered garters for doing. He did a lot of breeding studies and uh, um, within. Everybody would take a colubrid and try to have it producing eggs in the first year and a half.
Mm.
He was a pioneer on saying wait an extra year, and then he
Yes,
would
sir. Yeah.
show you it, within the next, say, 7, 8 years, how many more babies you produced from an animal that was 2.5 years old versus a year and a half years. But
Yes, sir. What was the argument against that at that time? right? Because I do agree with that, right? Give the animal a little bit more time. And
Um, okay, so when we'll take a say a Mex Mex as an example. You take a Mex Mex
okay,
and you super grow her and you get eggs from her at a year and a half. So
yes,
you
sir.
get 5 eggs. Chances are you're only going to get 5 eggs each year, unless you double clutch her. But back then, nobody was double clutching. Nobody really understood it. We thought, okay, they they've laid their egg. Okay, that's it. um, you pretty much are only going to get 5 eggs. Maybe as she gets older, you might get another one. But if you let that female get to 2.5 years, you may get upwards of 8 to 10 eggs
Yes,
per
sir. Yeah.
clutch. And I think I'm almost positive it was Neil Ford, Dr. Neil Ford, but he did this experiment. He did it with corn snakes. He did it with the checkered garters, and we brought him like 20. And I remember us giving him the bag at a meeting. He goes, "Oh, great! I hope I can breed these." I go, "Well, they've been copulating in the bag, you know." But we were right. We were down there, and it's weird. And this is in the fall, So, but anyways, during this trip, we only went up and down this road 4 times, and it was raining. And this little Volkswagen Beetle had a cracked windshield, and the wipers weren't good. On the four time we'd seen 4 DOR annulata,
Mm.
and we collected one big female that was alive, and we collected another one that was alive. And then we sort of, you're going down the road and you're kind of coming up over a hump.
Yes, sir.
In the middle of the road looked like a 6 foot tricolor.
Huh.
And we stood there, we were stunned. And we kind of looked at each other and we jumped out and ran up there. It was a 2 foot annulata, and there was a 42-inch coral snake, had it back by the tail. And this annulata is trying to get away, pulling it across the road. So, I mean, so we collected both of those guys, and we were, and I have seasonal allergies, and I was looking at the annulata, and I didn't realize I'd gotten coral snake venom on my fingers,
Oh.
and my nose is running, and I'm rubbing my nose, and you hold one nostril, and sniff, and all this. And after about 20 minutes, my nose started throbbing. And Adam goes, "Wait a minute, I know what happened." And we were like, "Oh shit!" So he says, "Do they have a hospital?" I go, "No, haul ass to San Antonio." So we started hauling ass to San Antonio, and about 45 minutes later, the throbbing went away.
Mm. uh,
So,
yeah, that'd be terrifying at that moment because that's a good little drive up to San Antonio.
oh
So
yeah,
yeah, no, and especially back then, holy hell,
I
yeah,
remember
no,
my
that'd been
heart
terrifying.
beating a lot, and I don't know if that was from the envenomation or probably was just from my nerves.
Yes, sir.
I was a
Yeah,
little
no,
concerned. Of course, I never
yeah,
told that story to my mom until years later.
yes, no, completely understandable. Yeah, you would have never been allowed to go out. Well, excellent. So then, at some point, um, you brought it up earlier that you ended up working with the Barkers. What was that like?
Ah, that was. Well, it was. I mean, it was. Well, first, what happened was. I mean, I was. I was in contact with Dave, and I I can't remember if I'd met Tracy before or not. But anyways, they were in town and they wanted to come by the zoo. And years ago, David worked with blood pythons. I don't know if he'd ever bred them or anything, but I mean he just was in love with big, especially with the nice ones, the big red ones. Um,
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure it's Curtis or Bronger's my. I I get them all mixed up. But anyways, um, they came out and I had uh, five big adults that that I worked with out there, and we bred them every year. And Dave wanted her to see really nice red blood pythons, so she came out, and anyways, so I hope then, and we bred them right on an exhibit. Of course, we set up nest boxes and artificially incubate the eggs. And we just had, I think it was a clutch of 15 hatched out. Anyway, so I showed her the adults, and she just loved them, and and she was like talking to Dave, saying, "God, can we get some of these?" And I said, "Well, I think we have some of these surplus, and they're it's in the zoo field, they're kind of common, so stuff like that they could sell to collectors rather than sell to the zoo." So
Yes, sir.
Dave talked to Dave, and they struck up a deal, and so I laid them all out and let Tracy pick out her blood pythons, and then they were the first blood pythons she ever worked with. And
How
then
cool is that?
I don't have to tell you what happened after that. I mean, she is the queen when it comes to blood python morphs.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting seeing where blood pythons have gone from when I was a kid, seeing them come into the pet shop, and it's not a species I kept up with. And then some of my customers are very much so into bloods and getting to kind of see their passion behind it. It's really enjoyable, and it's all new stuff to me. So very very impressive.
Yeah, if if they didn't bite so much, I think they would be a lot more popular. But they tend to have they they get scared easy, so of course they bite, and then they also have feeding response. They're not like a ball python. But anyway, shortly after that, I was talking with Dave, and he had a guy that was working out there, and that guy moved back to Oklahoma for some reason, and he offered me the job. So I went out there. I was only there for a year.
The animals you saw coming in, and what was that like compared to you coming from a very experienced zoo background and then now getting to see the kind of the private sector of it? What were your thoughts on that, and what were some of the highlights or just overall lessons you learned from it?
Well, there was a lot of stuff I was familiar with. Um, so, but then they were getting into lizard species,
Oh,
and
it all goes back to lizards. I never wanted to deal with lizards anyway.
you know, here's my take on it. So I'd like to pat myself on the back and say, "Oh yeah, I'm such a great husbandry person. I can switch from snakes to lizards." But here's the reality: if you have the patience to work with a snake, and of course, all the other zookeepers out there would tease us and go, "You guys don't work with animals. You dust the snakes off once ever so often, and then feed them once a month." That was the joke. But if you've got the patience for something with as low a metabolism as a snake, you get a lizard or a turtle that command your attention because they got a high metabolism. It's it, they come very easy.
Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Versus
and
is if you're a turtle or lizard guy and you start getting the snakes, I've noticed they get bored really quick. The snake doesn't do anything, and they go back to their lizards and turtles.
yeah. Well, that makes perfect sense. I mean, getting to mess with these species where you can reasonably get an animal to breed, much sooner than you can the average snake species.
Mhm.
It's pretty rewarding and fun. It's a good amount more work, but to get to see the ideas where we're used to a 4, 5, 6 year process there to try to, well, I think if I do this, this will happen. It can be very rewarding for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And when I was out at Fort Worth, um, one of my best friends, Stephen Hammock, he was a supervisor at Dallas, and Fort Worth hired him to be the supervisor at Fort Worth. So I got to work with Steve, and a lot of people don't. I mean, they know Steve, but they don't know Steve like I do. One of the most knowledgeable herpetoculturists and herpetologists I've ever known. So,
Mm.
I mean, he's got a mind like an elephant. He he learns something, he doesn't forget it.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, the hobby is so interesting, right? Because you have these gems of humanity, right, where you get to talk to these people and have these experiences with these people, and maybe that person just for whatever reason, right, isn't the most. They just that's not what they enjoy, and you're their friends, so you get to share those moments and those experiences and those conversations, and maybe that's in many hobbies, but I know that's something I've definitely experienced many times over in the reptile hobby. And it's a bummer sometimes because it's like, dude, that's so cool. Tell other people. And they're like, no. But it's also kind of cool to be in that circle.
Well, the interesting thing, uh, at least in the zoo field, and I also see it in the private sectors, and I'm talking as far as the herpers go. I mean, like when I was at the zoo, we I mean we ran everything. There was nobody outside of the department over us that say you do this like this and this. We're like you take the mammal department as an example. They keepers couldn't make decisions like herpetarium keepers can. Um, I mean, we can. I mean, we make decisions on we're going to breed this animal to this animal um, to develop this bloodline. Um, we're going to move this exhibit. We're going to change it to this. Um, there was just so much more freedom. Now I understand it's not like that anymore in the herpetariums. Some it is, and some it isn't. But I mean, pretty much nationwide. And then and then you have the private people. I mean, of course, I mean they invest their money and and they build their buildings and they develop their collection. So they make all the decisions. And
Yes.
So, in my opinion, a lot of your most talented and uh, uh, people to come out of the zoo field are people who came from the herpetariums, whether they stay with with reptiles and amphibians or they branch out into other animal husbandry aspects.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, and that's the interesting thing about the hobby, right? Is that with people that are into the tigers or whatever else there is, the citizen science aspect of it really isn't a factor. And so what's so cool about reptiles is it is such a direct reach into the public and vice versa for education and spreading that knowledge, that it's unique in that way. So I wonder if now, with it being a little bit more of a controlled, planned out thing with regulations, or more severe regulations, do you lose some of that outreach?
Yeah, yeah, no, you're right. You're right. No, I would definitely agree. As we're sitting here talking, I had completely forgot when I was down in Austin at this reform school. I got to where I could work a part-time job, and I worked at the Deep Eddy Natural Science Center at in Austin. There's a big natural spring-fed swimming pool there. I believe it's called Deep Eddy. But they also had a very small herpetarium, and I worked in there as a keeper. So technically, that was my first zoo job.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And then I also, when I was 18, there was a veterinarian in Richardson, Texas, Dr. Roy Diamond. He was the only veterinarian in Texas that uh, treated reptiles, and he was on call for Houston, San Antonio, Fort Worth, and Dallas.
Yeah. Wow. It's so interesting, how spoiled we are now, for veterinary care for our animals, where, again, early on, right? It's still even hard to come by now, but
Uh-huh.
relatively accessible. And so, especially back then, you know,
Yeah, yeah. Somebody gets a sick animal now, they take it to a vet, and in fact, that's the advice: take it to a vet. Um, where I don't know so much anymore, but back when a lot of veterinarians were getting into it, there were good herp vets, and there were herp vets that they didn't know anything, but they were willing to try, you know.
yes, sir.
But it's a business thing, and I get it. So
Yes or no, for sure. Well, very interesting. Well, before we get out of here for the night, is there anything else that I should ask you about, or I drop the ball on, or
oh
anything that stands?
no, I guess I have to apologize when I'm talking. I rabbit trail back and forth all over the place. Um,
No, sir. There's no reason to apologize for that. I love it. That is the beauty of this thing. Is I want just to sit down with people, and wherever it goes, we're riding, your thought process for this journey. And so I appreciate it. And
sure.
I feel like this is going to leave me with, I have a list of notes and topics that I want to talk to you about. And we'll have to do this again in the future, because I've thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with you tonight.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you need some ideas of some other people to interview, I can give you lots of suggestions.
Excellent. Well, I'll definitely take you up on that. Well, again, thank you so much, Mr. Thompson, for joining me tonight and chit chatting with me, and sharing your time with us.
I appreciate it. Just call me Tracy, by the way.
Yes, sir. Well, it. Yeah, well, I was raised to do it, so I'll try
No.
my
Hey,
best.
are you going to Dallas this weekend?
No, sir. No, sir. I'm not. I breed I breed rats and mice, and they don't care whether I'm there or not, so I got to be there.
High maintenance. I hear you. Wow.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, excellent. Well, thank you again very much.
All right. Well, thank you. And yeah, send me a link on this, and I'll listen to it if I can stand it.
Yes, sir.
Let me zoom out on you here. Okay, you got a message for the time capsule?
Yeah, and it's simply this. My prediction for you is that even though you'll forget all about this in some way consciously, next summer at about this time, you'll remember to return.